The Metroplex intercom crackled to life just as David Sterling lifted his son from the clinic waiting room chair. His routine consultation was finished, his small hand already reaching for his shoulder when the words stopped him cold. Code black, AB negative, blood required instantly. Pediatric crisis, all compatible personnel report to donation facility. David stood frozen in the corridor, his 7-year-old son, Finn, pressed against his chest. AB negative, the universally rare blood type. His blood type. Finn tugged at his jacket, his eyes wide with innocent curiosity. Daddy, can we assist? Before he could reply, the donation facility doors burst open, and there she stood, Serafina Thorne, CEO of Thorne Dynamics, the woman who had utterly crushed his professional standing mere hours before. Her face was bleached with panic, her custom leather boots clicking feverishly on the linoleum. Then she saw him, the maintenance worker, the man she had mocked in front of dozens of staff, the man who now held her daughter's salvation in his circulatory system. 6 hours earlier, the morning had commenced like any other for David Sterling. His alarm sounded at 4:45 a.m., the precise time it had rung for the past 4 years. He moved silently through the cramped apartment, cautious not to awaken Finn, who slept curled around his worn plush dragon in the bedroom they shared. The coffee machine hissed its familiar tune as he pulled on his work attire, charcoal slacks, a matching shirt with his name embroidered above the pocket. At 36, David had learned that pride was a commodity he could not perpetually afford. He possessed a doctorate in chemical physics from Stanford University, had once engineered fuel cells for commercial aircraft, had once worn bespoke suits and attended conferences where people addressed him as doctor. That existence concluded 4 years prior along with everything else he had painstakingly constructed. His wife Maria's complex illness bills had decimated their savings initially, then their home, then their prospects. When she ultimately succumbed to the illness, David was left with a crippling burden of debt and a 3-year-old son who still inquired when mommy was coming back. He accepted the first employment he could secure. Thorne Dynamics required maintenance staff for their corporate headquarters in Capital City. The remuneration was meager but reliable, the hours sufficiently early that he could collect Finn from the subsidized childcare by 3:30 p.m. He scrubbed floors and emptied waste bins in the identical building where physicists debated theories he could have advanced in his sleep. He never complained. He never disclosed his history. He simply toiled because Finn required him to toil. And that provided enough purpose. The primary atrium of Thorne Dynamics shimmered with polished granite floors and towering plate glass windows that captured the dawn light. David arrived at 5:45 a.m. to commence his shift, his utility cart laden with products. The atrium required particular scrutiny on Fridays. The executive committee convened their bi-weekly strategic session, and Serafina Thorne insisted on flawlessness in every visible area. David worked meticulously, starting with the windows and progressing to the floors. By 7:30 a.m., he was nearly finished, his cart positioned near the express elevator bank while he buffed the final segment of granite. He failed to notice Serafina Thorne approaching. He failed to hear her boots on the floor he had just perfected. He only heard her voice, sharp and frigid as Arctic wind. What is the meaning of this obstruction? David glanced up to find the CEO standing 10 feet away. Her tailored suit was impeccable. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe, tightly bound chignon. She was indicating his utility cart, which partially obstructed the route to the executive elevator. My apologies, ma'am. I will relocate it immediately. He reached for the cart, but Serafina was already speaking again, her voice carrying across the atrium where a dozen early arrivals had paused to observe. If this is the performance level we now employ, perhaps that explains why project schedules continue to unravel. Observe this refuse, equipment strewn everywhere, impeding executive access, generating safety liabilities. She turned to the head of security at the front desk, who supervised the custodial team. I require a comprehensive disciplinary report on my console by noon. David pulled his cart aside, his movements deliberate and restrained. He had ascertained long ago that reacting to public humiliation merely intensified it. I regret the inconvenience, he stated softly. It will not occur again. Serafina looked at him, then genuinely looked at him for the first time. Her gaze swept over his uniform, his calloused hands, the premature silver threading through his dark hair. Whatever she perceived validated a preconception in her mind, something that caused her lip to curl slightly. Ensure that it doesn't. She swept past him without another syllable, her boots clicking, a rhythmic sound of utter dismissal on the granite he had devoted an hour to polishing. The atrium remained silent. David felt the sheer weight of every stare, the pity and awkwardness of individuals who were relieved they were not him. He completed his work with unwavering hands, loaded his cart, and pushed it toward the service quarter. Behind him, he heard someone murmur, "Poor bloke." She had no justification for that. He kept walking. In 3 hours, he would clock out and collect Finn. He would take him to his pediatrician's consultation. He would make him laugh on the rapid transit ride home. Serafina Thorne's insults would dissipate like all the other scars he carried. He had endured worse. He would endure this too. The pediatric clinic at St. Jude's Medical Center was habitually busy on Friday afternoons, but David had mastered the navigation of the commotion. He checked Finn in at 2:50 p.m., secured seats in the packed waiting area, and retrieved the sci-fi novel he had brought to fill the time. Finn was 7 now, slender for his age but spirited. He possessed his mother's hazel eyes and his father's relentless focus, and he confronted his quarterly checkups with the same quiet resilience Maria had displayed during her final months. The appointments were precautionary, monitoring the mild respiratory weakness the physicians had detected at birth, ensuring it had not progressed. Thus far, Finn had been fortunate. The weakness remained stable, necessitating only consistent surveillance. "Mr. Sterling," the nurse called them back at 3:20 p.m. David lifted Finn onto his hip and followed her down the hall, past examination bays and utility closets toward the children's wing. They were passing the emergency entrance when the commotion erupted. A gurney exploded through the double doors, encircled by paramedics shouting directions. David pressed Finn against the wall to permit their passage, catching only fleeting impressions of the scene. A small figure on the stretcher, oxygen mask over a ghostly face, monitors emitting urgent beeps. "Female, approximate age 6, one paramedic yelled. "Severe internal trauma, vitals plunging, guardian en route." The gurney vanished around the bend, but David remained immobilized, his heart pounding with a father's innate dread. The child on that stretcher was someone's daughter, someone's entire universe. "Daddy," Finn's voice was tiny. "Will that little girl be all right?" "The physicians are assisting her, sweetie. That is what physicians are trained to do." He carried him toward their consultation room, attempting to erase the image of that small, motionless form. But fate, it appeared, had divergent plans. 20 minutes later, David was carrying Finn back through the hospital corridors when he heard the piercing shriek. It originated from ahead of them near the intersection of hallways, followed by the clatter of dropped medical apparatus. He rounded the corner to encounter utter pandemonium. A transport chair lay overturned in the middle of the passage. A technician was on her knees, screaming for urgent assistance. And on the floor, mere inches from David's boots, lay the identical little girl from the gurney. Her hospital gown was askew, her face ashen, her small body violently seizing. "She ripped out her line and tried to run," the technician gasped. "I couldn't restrain her. Her mother is still not here. I need immediate help." David placed Finn down gently against the wall. "Stay right here, buddy. Do not move." Then he dropped to his knees beside the convulsing child. His emergency response training from his advanced physics days resurfaced like inherent reflex. He turned the girl onto her side to safeguard her airway, cushioned her head with his jacket, and held her still as the seizures racked her small frame. "Summon a physician," he commanded the technician. "Now!" The seizure endured for 45 seconds. David tallied each one, his hand steady on the child's shoulders, his voice deep and reassuring. "You are fine. You are secure. I have you firmly." When the convulsions finally subsided, the girl's eyes fluttered open. They were emerald green, wide with acute fear, and filled with tears. Her small hand sought at his wrist and grasped it with astonishing force. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Do not permit me to expire. My mommy is not present. Please do not let me expire." David felt a profound rupture in his chest. He thought of Finn watching from against the wall. He thought of Maria dying in a hospital bed while he held her hand and uttered vows he could not fulfill. "You are not going to expire," he said resolutely. "I am precisely here. I am not going anywhere." The rapid response team materialized seconds later, lifting the girl onto a clean gurney, connecting monitors, yelling out readings. David stepped back, his jacket still crumpled on the floor, his hands faintly trembling now that the immediate danger had passed. Finn ran to him and wrapped his arms around his legs. "You helped her, Daddy. You saved her." David picked up his son and held him tight, inhaling the familiar scent of his son's laundry detergent. Somewhere in the distance, he heard a woman's voice, high-pitched and hysterical, demanding to know the location of her daughter. He did not witness Serafina Thorne sprint past. He did not witness her face collapse when she reached the trauma bay. He only knew that somewhere in this facility, a mother was consumed by terror, and a little girl was battling for her life. The blood donation facility at St. Jude's Medical Center was situated on the ground floor, nestled between the staff canteen and the administrative sector. Most days it served a consistent influx of scheduled donors and spontaneous walk-ins, processing units of blood that would preserve lives across the city. Today, it was the epicenter of a catastrophic emergency. "We are entirely depleted of AB negative," the blood bank supervisor announced, her voice strained with controlled panic. She was speaking to Dr. Lee, the pediatric surgeon who had been operating on the Thorne girl for the past hour. "I have contacted 4 other regional hospitals. Everyone is critically low. The provincial blood repository can supply 3 units, but they will not arrive for at least 5 hours." Dr. Lee's expression was grim. "She does not possess 5 hours. The hemorrhage is contained for now, but she has lost an insurmountable volume of blood. Her system is collapsing. We require a complete transfusion within the hour or we will lose her entirely." David was still inside the hospital. Finn's consultation had been completed, his respiratory weakness unchanged, his health deemed excellent, but they had been delayed by the severe chaos in the hallways. Now they waited in the main atrium for the crowd at the exit to thin when the intercom sputtered to life. "Code Black, AB, negative blood required instantly. Pediatric crisis. All compatible personnel report to donation facility." David looked down at his son. Finn looked back at him with Maria's eyes full of innate trust and quiet perception. "That is your blood type, is it not, Daddy? The extraordinary kind?" "Yes, sweetie, it is." He recalled the little girl who had gripped his wrist and pleaded with him not to let her expire. He thought of her mother somewhere in this hospital, confronting the identical nightmare he had faced 4 years prior. He stood up and took Finn's hand. "We need to go assist someone." The donation facility was packed with hospital personnel when David arrived, all of them being tested, the majority of them being turned away. AB negative blood was extremely rare, present in only 1% of the population. Locating a compatible donor in time was akin to seeking a tiny diamond in a mountain of sand. David approached the intake desk, Finn's hand still gripping his. "I am AB negative," he stated. "I wish to donate." The coordinator looked up, her eyes examining his face with desperate hope. "Are you certain? We require a substantial volume. It will necessitate an extended donation procedure." "I understand the parameters." She handed him necessary forms to complete, then directed him to a screening station. The assessment took 15 minutes. Blood pressure, iron saturation, medical background. David answered every inquiry truthfully. He watched the coordinator's expression transition from hope to disbelief. "Your blood is a flawless match," she stated slowly. "More than flawless, in fact. You possess an exceptionally rare antigens combination that makes your blood uniquely compatible. It is identified in perhaps 1 in 50,000 people." She paused, appearing to weigh her subsequent words with caution. "Mr. Sterling, the quantity of blood this child requires, it is substantial. You would unequivocally save her life. But there are inherent risks, severe dizziness, extreme exhaustion, potentially unconsciousness. Are you absolutely unequivocal in your decision?" David thought of the little girl's emerald eyes, so reminiscent of Finn's in their terror. "I am unequivocal." It was precisely then that the doors burst inward, and Serafina Thorne stumbled into the room. Her face was streaked with tears, her perfect hair disheveled, her custom suit wrinkled from hours of frantic pacing. She looked like a woman who had been systematically dismantled piece by raw terror. "Please," she gasped at the coordinator. "My daughter, they indicated someone might be able to assist, please." And then she saw him. David watched the immediate recognition dawn in her eyes. The maintenance worker from the atrium, the man whose equipment had obstructed her path, the man she had publicly humiliated in front of her employees, whose dignity she had callously crushed beneath her designer boots. He watched her face cycle through severe shock, profound confusion, and something that might have been acute remorse. He watched her mouth fall open, searching desperately for coherent words that simply would not materialize. "Mr. Sterling is a flawless match," the coordinator announced, completely oblivious to the intense tension. "He has agreed to donate. Your daughter is going to be all right, Mrs. Thorne." Serafina Thorne stared at David Sterling, and for the first time in her highly successful life, she possessed absolutely nothing further to utter. The donation chamber was small and sterile, filled with the soft whir of machinery and the gentle beeping of monitoring equipment. David lay on the narrow cot, his sleeve neatly rolled up, a needle inserted into the prominent vein at his elbow. The blood flowed through the clear tube in a steady, life-affirming crimson stream, transporting vital life from his body to the collection bag. Finn sat in a chair by the window, his plush dragon clutched tightly to his chest, his gaze never once leaving his father's pale face. He had not wept, had not complained, had not requested permission to depart. He simply watched with the quiet understanding of a child who had already learned that true love sometimes demanded profound sacrifice. Dr. Lee had meticulously explained the procedure. The Thorne girl required significantly more blood than a standard donation provided. David had readily agreed to supply 2 full units, nearly half a liter of blood, stretching the boundaries of what was safely permissible for a single donation. There would be unavoidable repercussions: weakness, profound dizziness, possibly severe nausea. He would need to rest for several consecutive days, consume iron-rich nutrients, and vigilantly monitor himself for any ensuing complications. David had agreed to every requirement without a moment of hesitation. "You are performing admirably," the phlebotomist remarked, checking the filling collection bag. "We are approximately halfway to target." David offered a slight nod, fighting the encroaching lightheadedness that was beginning to seep in. He focused intensely on Finn's face, on his small form silhouetted against the ambient window light, on the fierce protective love that had carried him through every impossible challenge of the past 4 years. "Daddy?" Finn's voice was barely a whisper. "Are you truly okay?" "I'm perfectly fine, sweetheart. Just a little bit weary." "That little girl, she is going to be safe now?" "Yes, baby. She is going to be safe." Outside the donation chamber, Serafina Thorne stood utterly frozen in the corridor. Through the small, reinforced window, she could see the man she had casually humiliated lying on a hospital cot, willingly offering his blood to save her daughter's fragile existence. His own son sat faithfully beside him, small and remarkably patient and brave, watching his father with eyes brimming with a mixture of love and genuine worry. Serafina had forged her entire career on accurately assessing people, on deciphering motivations, predicting nuanced reactions, and pinpointing weaknesses to effectively leverage. She had ascended to the apex of Thorne dynamics by being analytically smarter, intrinsically harder, and consistently more ruthless than anyone else occupying the corporate suite. But staring through that transparent window now, she realized with a sickening lurch that she had never truly understood anything at all. The maintenance worker was not just a maintenance worker. He was a devoted father, just as she was a devoted mother. He had a child who desperately needed him, just as her child desperately needed her. He had a vibrant life existing beyond the pristine lobby he meticulously cleaned, a life filled with private dreams and crushing fears and profound loves that she had never once paused to conceive. And when presented with the unimaginable choice, he had unreservedly chosen to save her daughter, without hesitation, without imposing conditions, devoid of any of the cynical, strategic calculations that governed her own existence. The phlebotomist emerged from the room, carefully carrying the full collection bags. We have successfully collected the necessary volume. Dr. Lee is preparing the transfusion immediately. Your daughter should stabilize within the hour, Mrs. Thorne. Serafina nodded mutely, utterly incapable of forming a syllable. She watched through the window as David Sterling slowly sat upright, swaying momentarily, graciously accepting a cup of highly sugared juice from the assisting nurse with a small, weary smile. She watched his son instantly rush to him, wrapping his tiny arms tightly around his neck, pressing his face urgently against his father's shoulder. And Serafina Thorne, CEO of a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, a woman synonymous with absolute power, immense influence, and unparalleled control, felt a sensation she had successfully avoided for many years. Shame. Deep, corrosive, utterly inescapable shame. The urgent transfusion procedure required 45 intense minutes. Serafina spent every single second of that time in the sterile hallway outside her daughter's assigned room, watching anxiously through the small viewing window as the precious blood David Sterling had donated flowed steadily into Amelia's small, vulnerable body. The monitors displayed her vital signs stabilizing, her dangerously low blood pressure rising steadily, her oxygen saturation levels returning to a healthy normal. The sickly gray pallor slowly receded from her cheeks, replaced by the faint pink hue of returning life. Dr. Lee emerged at 7:25 p.m., his face finally reflecting the deep professional relief that Serafina had been too afraid to let herself feel. She is clinically stable. The transfusion was a resounding success. She will require scheduled surgery tomorrow to repair the residual damage from the hemorrhage. But her long-term prognosis is excellent. Serafina collapsed against the nearest wall, silent tears streaming unchecked down her face. May I see her immediately? She is sleeping deeply now, but yes, you may certainly sit quietly with her. Serafina entered the room slowly, cautiously, as if approaching a sanctuary. Amelia lay still in the hospital bed, appearing impossibly small against the stark white linens, but her breathing was steady and her young face was peaceful. Serafina took her daughter's hand and held it firmly, feeling the comforting warmth of her skin, the gentle pulse beating steadily at her wrist. I nearly lost you, she whispered, her voice choking. I nearly lost absolutely everything that matters. She sat there for nearly an hour, meticulously watching Amelia sleep, painstakingly processing the shattering events of the day. At 8:15 p.m., a gentle tap interrupted her emotional vigil. She looked up to find a floor nurse standing discreetly in the doorway. Mrs. Thorne, I thought you might appreciate knowing the gentleman who donated the blood for your daughter. He is being discharged now. He is currently in the main atrium, waiting for a scheduled taxi with his son. Serafina immediately stood up. I must speak with him at once. I should mention something first. The nurse hesitated, selecting her words with extreme care. I recognized Mr. Sterling when he arrived. He is employed at Thorne Dynamics. He is part of the maintenance staff. But before that, well, one of the older nurses knew him from years ago. He used to be a chemical physicist, an incredibly talented one, apparently. He gave up his entire career when his wife became gravely ill, spent every asset he possessed attempting to save her, then accepted whatever employment he could secure to support his son after she tragically passed. Serafina felt the words land like harsh, physical blows. A physicist, a grieving widower, a man who had sacrificed his entire professional life for love, and she had treated him as though he were utterly disposable. His son, the nurse continued softly, the little boy with him, he has a mild respiratory condition. Nothing serious presently, but he requires consistent, high-cost monitoring. Mr. Sterling works 2 separate jobs just to keep up with the overwhelming medical bills. No private insurance, but he never misses a single required appointment. Serafina recalled the specific manner in which she had addressed him in the lobby, the unconcealed contempt in her tone, the absolute dismissal in her eyes. She had looked directly at a true hero and had only registered a janitor. She had looked directly at a grieving father and had only perceived a minor obstacle. Thank you, she managed finally, for informing me. She walked out of Amelia's room on unsteady legs, heading directly for the atrium. She had no idea what she would possibly say. She had no idea if any word she spoke could ever truly undo the damage she had inflicted, but she knew with stark certainty that she had to trauma. The hospital atrium was nearly deserted at 8:45 p.m. on a Friday evening. David sat slumped on a public bench near the exit doors, Finn fast asleep in his lap, waiting patiently for the taxi he had called on his mobile. The extended donation had extracted more from him than he had truly anticipated. His head throbbed severely, his limbs felt impossibly heavy, and a persistent, nauseating dizziness made standing incredibly difficult. But Finn was warm and reassuring against his chest, and Amelia Thorne was alive and recovering, and that, ultimately, was enough. He heard the distinct footsteps before he physically saw her. The click-clack of high heels on linoleum, hesitant now instead of commanding authority. He looked up to find Serafina Thorne standing 10 feet away. Her face was a mask of palpable uncertainty he had never witnessed before. "Mr. Sterling," she stopped abruptly, seeming to wrestle with whatever came next. "Please, may I sincerely offer my apologies?" David looked at her for a prolonged moment. He thought of the devastating morning, of the gleaming atrium, of the cruel words that had cut deeper than she would ever be capable of knowing. He thought of Maria, who had patiently taught him that genuine kindness was never a weakness, that forgiveness was never an act of surrender. "You do not need to apologize, Mrs. Thorne," he stated quietly. "I simply performed an action anyone would perform in that situation." "No," Serafina took a small step closer, her voice audibly cracking. "Not anyone. I would not have, had our positions been reversed. If you had publicly humiliated me the way I ruthlessly humiliated you, I honestly do not know if I would have been capable of helping." She paused, swallowing hard, visibly struggling for composure. "You saved my daughter's life. After absolutely everything I said to you, after the unforgivable way I treated you, you saved her life without a moment of hesitation. Why did you do it?" David considered the profound question. Why had he done it? Because Amelia had gripped his wrist and pleaded with him not to let her expire. Because Finn had innocently inquired if they could assist. Because Maria had always fiercely believed that the true measure of a person was not how they treated those above them in status, but precisely how they treated those perceived as below them. "Because she is a child," he said simply. "Because she was terrified and her mother was not physically present. Because I possessed the capacity to help." He gently shifted Finn in his arms, preparing to stand up. "My son is very tired. I need to get him safely home now." "Please." Serafina stepped forward again, her hand spontaneously reaching out. "Let me at least arrange transportation for you. A proper, safe vehicle with an appropriate car seat for your son. Let me perform some small act of recompense." David looked at her outstretched hand, at the raw desperation visible in her eyes. He thought of all the innumerable times he had been casually dismissed, deliberately overlooked, consistently treated as less than worthy. He thought of how effortlessly simple it would be to just walk away, to allow her to fully wallow in her self-inflicted guilt, to take some minor, fleeting satisfaction in her obvious suffering. But that was simply not who he fundamentally was. That was not the man Maria had unconditionally loved. "A car service would be genuinely appreciated," he conceded finally. "Thank you." Serafina's profound relief was instantly palpable. She swiftly pulled out her phone, placed a quick, decisive call, and arranged for a pristine company vehicle to drive them home. When it arrived approximately 15 minutes later, she personally walked them out to the curb, watching intently as David carefully settled Finn into the pre-installed car seat as he buckled himself securely in beside him. "Mr. Sterling," she said just as he reached for the door handle, "I wronged you profoundly today. I judged you entirely without knowing a single thing about you. I am deeply sorry, truly, irreparably sorry." David met her eyes directly. He saw genuine shame there, and regret, and something nascent that might have been the crucial beginning of significant change. He did not offer forgiveness. That was simply not his to give. Not yet. Not while the stinging wound was still so undeniably fresh. But he offered something else entirely. "Thank you sincerely for the transport," he said. "I sincerely hope your daughter makes a full recovery soon." He closed the door firmly and the pristine car smoothly pulled away into the deep night, leaving Serafina Thorne standing entirely alone on the hospital steps, staring blankly after him. The emergency board meeting was formally scheduled for 9 o'clock a.m. the following Saturday morning. Serafina had been dreading the inevitable confrontation since she received the formal summons late Thursday night. She knew precisely what they would vigorously argue. She had unilaterally abandoned a critically important investor presentation to rush to the hospital. She had forced Jonathan Chen, the CFO, to awkwardly field complex questions he was utterly unprepared to answer. She had brazenly prioritized her personal life ahead of tangible company interests. And in the unforgiving realm of corporate executive leadership, that was frequently an unforgivable transgression. The opulent boardroom was completely full when she arrived, 8 intensely serious faces arranged meticulously around the massive mahogany table, none of them expressing any warmth or approval. Harold Weston, the chairman, sat imposingly at the head, his expression carved from granite. "Serafina, please be seated." She sat down, her spine rigidly straight, her face a mark of practiced composure. She had learned many years ago to flawlessly conceal any perceived weakness in this particular room. "Assume you are fully aware of precisely why we urgently convened this meeting," Harold continued, his tone clinical. "Your unannounced departure yesterday caused immediate and significant alarm among our institutional investors. Jonathan performed admirably to reassure them, but serious questions were explicitly raised regarding your unwavering commitment to the company, your core judgment, and your ultimate priorities." Serafina listened without interrupting the flow of criticism. She had meticulously prepared for this, had repeatedly rehearsed her explanation, had marshaled every convincing argument. But sitting here now, staring intently at the faces of people who perceived her only as a functional component of quarterly earnings, she felt a profound internal shift occur. "My daughter was nearly dead yesterday," she stated quietly, her voice ringing with unexpected clarity. "She suffered a massive internal hemorrhage. She required immediate, life-saving surgery and an emergency blood transfusion from a critically rare donor." She met the chairman's cold gaze unflinchingly. "I departed that essential meeting because I was explicitly informed she might not survive the night." The immense room fell into a heavy, uncomfortable silence. Harold cleared his throat awkwardly. "We fully grasp the severity of that, Serafina, and we are genuinely relieved she is recovering well. But this corporation employs over 4,000 individuals. Their entire livelihoods depend on absolutely stable leadership, on investors who implicitly trust us to prioritize the business above all else. I fully understand that imperative." Serafina looked deliberately around the massive table, meeting each pair of watchful eyes in sequence. "And I have dedicated 15 unrelenting years, proving that I am capable of delivering exactly that stability. I have forfeited birthdays, neglected recitals, and missed crucial school plays. I have missed first steps and first uttered words and first days of school. I have given this company every ounce of my life, and I constantly rationalized to myself that it was a worthy sacrifice because I was building something fundamentally important." She paused, feeling the weight of the words forming, feeling the undeniable, profound truth of them deep in her very bones. "Yesterday, a maintenance worker saved my daughter's life. A man I had intentionally humiliated that very morning. A man I had utterly dismissed as existing beneath my personal notice. He willingly donated his blood, voluntarily and without any expectation of reward, because my daughter was merely a child in mortal danger, and he possessed the unique capacity to assist her." She envisioned David Sterling sitting silently in the hospital atrium, with Finn sleeping peacefully in his lap, utterly exhausted and dizzy, yet refusing to leave until he knew Amelia was definitively stable. "That man possesses nothing by our corporate metrics," Serafina continued, her voice gaining intensity. "No private insurance, no meaningful savings, no established safety net whatsoever. But he possesses something critically important that I irrevocably lost a very long time ago. He possesses his priorities flawlessly aligned. He intrinsically knows what truly matters in life." Harold frowned, visibly disturbed. "Serafina, this is undeniably touching, but—" "I am not offering my resignation," Serafina interrupted him sharply, "and I am certainly not offering an apology for abandoning that critical meeting. What I am doing is radically changing. This corporation is going to fundamentally become the kind of organization where a devoted single father, working multiple exhausting jobs, can readily secure necessary health insurance for his child, where all employees are treated with absolute dignity, regardless of their functional position, where profit margins are unequivocally not the sole measure of our institutional success. She stood up slowly, gathering her scattered papers with controlled deliberation. You eight can either wholeheartedly support me in implementing this essential change, or you can expediently replace me. But I am fundamentally finished pretending that wielding immense power requires me to be cruel or dismissive. She purposefully walked out of the silent boardroom, leaving 8 utterly stunned faces lingering behind her. That same afternoon, Serafina returned to the hospital with renewed purpose. Amelia was wide awake now, sitting up comfortably in bed and watching distracting cartoons, appearing miraculously healthy for a child who had been perilously close to death barely 24 hours earlier. "Mommy!" Emilia's small face instantly brightened when Serafina entered the room. "The nice doctor said I am doing exceptionally well. They said the special blood from the Verikine man saved me entirely." Serafina sat gently on the edge of the bed, lovingly smoothing her daughter's soft hair. "Yes, sweetheart, he absolutely did save you. Can I formally meet him soon? I want to say thank you properly." Serafina thought deeply of David Sterling, of his quiet, resolute dignity, of his gentle, firm refusal to accept her half-hearted apology. "Perhaps another day, baby, if he genuinely wishes to meet you." A soft, tentative knock interrupted their conversation. Serafina turned to find David standing hesitantly in the doorway. Finn peeked out nervously from behind his father's legs. "I sincerely apologize for the intrusion," David said softly. The nurse mentioned Amelia was recovering well. Finn desperately wanted to create a get-well card for her. He held up a piece of brightly colored construction paper entirely covered in enthusiastic crayon drawings, vibrant flowers, numerous hearts, and 2 stick figures clutching hands. Serafina felt tears spontaneously spring to her eyes. "Please, come inside immediately." David entered the room slowly, his movements still showing the unmistakable physical effects of yesterday's massive donation. Finn held back shyly, suddenly overwhelmed, clutching the handmade card tightly to his chest. Amelia leaned forward with eager anticipation, her eyes wide with immense curiosity. "Are you the nice man who saved me?" David immediately knelt beside the bed, carefully bringing himself down to Amelia's eye level. "I simply assisted the doctors a little bit. They performed the vast majority of the intensive work." "Daddy gave all his blood," Finn proudly announced, finding his courage. "Because you genuinely needed it, and he possessed the perfectly right kind. He was super brave." Amelia looked intently at the small boy with sheer wonder. "Is he truly your daddy?" "The absolute best daddy in the entire world." David managed a small smile, the first genuinely relaxed smile Serafina had witnessed from him. "Girls, why don't you both show each other the lovely card? I strongly suspect Emilia might truly enjoy the flowers." As the 2 children immediately bent their heads over Finn's artwork, spontaneously chattering already like inseparable old friends, Serafina quietly stepped closer to David. "Thank you so very much for coming to visit," she said softly. "Finn insisted strongly," David replied. "He has been relentlessly inquiring about Amelia all day long. He is a truly wonderful boy. You have raised him impeccably well, Mr. Sterling." David looked adoringly at his son, his eyes soft and filled with love. "I sincerely think he has truly raised me." After his mother tragically passed, he was the only remaining thing that anchored me and kept me going forward. They stood in a comfortable silence for a brief moment, simply watching the 2 girls interact. Amelia was enthusiastically showing Finn the various control buttons on her adjustable hospital bed, making it playfully rise and fall while Finn giggled delightedly. "I meant every single word I said yesterday." Serafina finally broke the silence, her voice firm. "About being sorry, about misjudging you so harshly. I have spent my entire life incorrectly measuring people by their assigned positions, their perceived power, their practical usefulness to my business objectives. I never once stopped to genuinely see them as complex human beings." David turned fully to look at her. His expression remained utterly unreadable. Why are you sharing this with me now? Because I desperately want to be better than I was. Because I want to genuinely be the kind of person my daughter can one day be truly proud of. She paused, gathering her remaining courage. And because I have something vitally important I want to ask of you, not as a simple apology, but as a genuine, transformative opportunity. David remained silent for an extended moment. What precise kind of opportunity are you referring to, Mrs. Thorne? Thorne Dynamics fundamentally needs to change its core culture. We desperately need to treat our employees, all of them, with profound respect, with unwavering dignity. We need to implement policies that unequivocally support working parents, that fully acknowledge the immense personal sacrifices people constantly make, that truly value complex human beings over cold productivity metrics. She took a deep breath, visibly steeling herself. I intend to immediately launch a comprehensive support program specifically designed for single parents within our company. Full health insurance coverage, massively flexible scheduling, robust emergency childcare provisions, and I want you to personally help me design and implement it. David stared blankly at her. You want me to lead this? You possess the intimate, first-hand knowledge of what these families desperately require. You have lived the brutal reality. I can easily throw endless capital at superficial programs all day long, but without a dedicated individual who fundamentally understands the raw, lived reality, it will be nothing more than empty corporate PR. She met his eyes, earnestly hoping he could perceive her sincerity. I am not offering simple charity, Mr. Sterling. I am formally offering a significant consulting position, part-time initially, fully salaried with comprehensive benefits for both you and Finn. You may retain your other job if you wish, or you can transition to working directly for me in a role that effectively utilizes your physics background. Whatever you ultimately choose, I absolutely require your honest voice permanently in the room. David looked over at Finn, who was now meticulously braiding Amelia's hair with the intense solemnity of a highly focused surgeon. He thought of Maria, of the shared dreams they had cherished, of the life they had carefully planned before relentless illness and crippling debt had violently torn it all away. I have been judged relentlessly my entire life, he said slowly, his voice low, for being financially poor, for accepting employment that people dismiss as beneath my formal education, for being unable to provide my son with every single thing he inherently deserves. He turned back to Serafina, his expression softening marginally. I stopped genuinely caring what superficial people thought a very long time ago. But this could fundamentally change something vital, not just for me, but for people exactly like me across the whole company. He extended his hand deliberately. I will accept the position, but I have formal conditions. The program must be demonstrably real, not just a temporary PR stunt. And you must genuinely listen when I tell you difficult things you may not sincerely want to hear. Serafina immediately took his hand, feeling the surprising calluses on his palm, the inherent strength in his grip. Agreed completely. From the hospital bed, Amelia excitedly called out, Mommy, Finn says he wants to be my closest friend. Can he please come to my birthday party next month? Serafina looked directly at David. He looked back at her, and for the first time, something genuinely warm and human passed distinctly between them. I strongly believe that arrangement can be easily facilitated, Serafina replied, a genuine smile touching her lips. The Single Parent Support Initiative formally launched 6 weeks later on a bright, crisp Monday morning in mid-October. The official ceremony was held in the main atrium of Thorne Dynamics, the identical atrium where David had once been publicly humiliated, where Serafina had looked down upon him and perceived nothing worth knowing. Today, a small, elegant stage had been temporarily erected near the express elevators, lavishly draped with banners proudly announcing the Serafina Sterling Single Parent Initiative. David had respectfully insisted on the combined name over Serafina's initial firm objections. It is not fundamentally about me, she had argued sincerely. It is profoundly about the employees, the families. It's about accountability, David had countered firmly. When your own name is publicly attached to something so vital, You cannot possibly walk away from it easily. The atrium was densely packed with employees, executives, maintenance workers, physicists, and receptionists, all gathered seamlessly together for the first time anyone could accurately recall. Serafina stood formally at the podium, David positioned respectfully beside her, as she meticulously detailed the program's extensive benefits: fully subsidized health insurance, robust emergency childcare funding, universally flexible scheduling options, paid family leave allowances. This program only exists because one extraordinary man patiently taught me a fundamental lesson I should have intrinsically grasped many years ago, Serafina announced, her voice resonating with deep emotion. He taught me that inherent dignity is not earned through status. It is unequivocally inherent. Every single person who walks through these massive doors deserves to be fully seen, to be genuinely valued, to be consistently treated with profound respect. She turned slightly toward David, who visibly shifted uncomfortably under the intense attention. David Sterling willingly donated his life-saving blood to rescue my daughter's life. Knowing I had treated him with utter contempt, he exhibited immense grace when I deserved none, and he helped me meticulously construct a program that I genuinely hope will positively change countless lives. She stepped back respectfully from the podium, gesturing for David to approach and speak. He approached the microphone reluctantly, Finn watching intently from the front row, with Amelia sitting excitedly beside him. "I am honestly not particularly adept at public speeches," he began, drawing a ripple of gentle laughter from the assembled crowd. "I am significantly more proficient at accurately fixing things. Complex machines, intricate systems, problems that possess clear, logical solutions." He paused, looking out intently at the diverse crowd. "But certain problems simply do not possess clear, easily achievable solutions. Being a struggling single parent is unquestionably one of those problems. Every single day is a complex, exhausting calculation. How much precious sleep can I possibly sacrifice? How many endless hours can I safely work? How do I consistently ensure my son knows he is deeply, unconditionally loved? Even when I am utterly exhausted and secretly terrified and barely holding on to my sanity." His voice softened perceptibly. "This comprehensive program will certainly not instantaneously solve every single challenge, but it might just make the calculation marginally easier. It might just mean one less parent is forced to make the agonizing choice between attending a critical doctor's appointment and receiving a necessary paycheck. It might just mean one more beautiful child is afforded the chance to grow up intrinsically, knowing they truly matter to their company." He looked directly at Finn, who smiled back at him with Maria's incredibly expressive eyes. "That is inherently worth something immense. That is worth absolutely everything." 3 months later, on a beautifully crisp January afternoon, Serafina and Amelia sat together in the clean waiting room of the pediatric cardiology clinic at St. Jude's Medical Center. Amelia was present for her final necessary follow-up appointment, the last crucial checkpoint before the highly attentive doctors declared her officially and completely recovered. Across the busy room, David and Finn waited patiently for their own regular appointment. Finn scheduled routine monitoring, the familiar schedule they had diligently followed for years. "Miss Thorne," the nurse called Amelia's name, and Serafina stood up to follow, but she paused deliberately at the doorway, turning back to look directly at David. "Would you four like to get some coffee afterward? There is a quaint little cafe downstairs that reportedly makes truly excellent hot chocolate for the children." David looked instinctively at Finn, who nodded eagerly in excited agreement. "We would genuinely like that very much, Mrs. Thorne." The scheduled appointments collectively required a full hour. Amelia's final results were declared perfect. A full, comprehensive recovery. Absolutely no lasting physiological damage from her severe ordeal. Finn's checkup was equally encouraging. His mild respiratory weakness remained definitively stable, showing zero signs of adverse progression. When they convened in the cozy cafe afterward, the two children immediately claimed a small corner table by the large window, their heads bent closely together over the stack of fresh coloring pages the nurse had thoughtfully given them. David and Serafina sat nearby, silently watching their respective children with identical expressions of profound, quiet wonder. "She talks incessantly about Finn now," Serafina commented softly. Finn this, Finn that. I genuinely believe she has found her very best friend. The feeling is absolutely mutual, David replied, smiling faintly. Finn asked me seriously last week if Amelia could potentially be his sister. He shook his head slowly, still smiling at the memory. I gently explained that is not precisely how it usually works. Serafina laughed softly, a genuine sound that had become noticeably more frequent in recent months. They are fundamentally good for each other. Amelia has never before had a friend who did not treat her differently because of who I am. Finn has never had a friend who did not treat him differently because of who I am not. They lapsed into a comfortable, easy silence, sipping their respective hot beverages, quietly watching the first flakes of heavy snow begin to fall outside the window. David, Serafina began finally, her voice more serious, I have been thinking deeply about the success of the program, about absolutely everything that has intensely transpired between us. She turned fully to face him. I know definitively that I can never completely undo the cruel words I spoke to you that day in the atrium. I understand fully that sorry does not instantaneously erase deep hurt, but I genuinely want you to know that the single act of meeting you fundamentally changed me. It made me finally see things I had been willingly blind to my entire adult life. David considered her profound words carefully. He thought of Maria, of how she had always instinctively believed in second chances, in the stubborn, inherent possibility of genuine human change, in the stubborn goodness often hidden deep within every human heart. My wife used to observe that people are ultimately like complex machines, he replied, his gaze distant. Sometimes they catastrophically break down. Sometimes they simply require thorough recalibration. He offered a small, knowing smile. I believe you have successfully recalibrated quite well, Serafina. Serafina felt immediate tears prick her eyes again. That might just be the very nicest thing anyone has ever candidly said to me. Don't allow it to inflate your ego unnecessarily, David countered, but he was smiling broadly now too. From the window table, Emilia excitedly called out, Can we go outside and play in the snow, Mommy, please? Finn immediately added, his eyes bright with irresistible hope. David and Serafina looked directly at each other across the small table. In that instant, something profound and unspoken passed clearly between them. A silent, powerful acknowledgement of profound wounds healing, of insurmountable walls finally crumbling down, of exhilarating possibilities suddenly opening wide where absolutely none had logically existed before. What do you think, David? Serafina asked softly. Should we permit them to drag us out into the bitter cold right now? David looked lovingly at his son, at his sheer joy and innocence, at the new friend he had miraculously found against all conceivable odds. He thought of Maria and how fiercely she would have cherished this very moment, this tangible proof that genuine human kindness possessed the unique power to transform total strangers into an approximation of family. Perhaps that is precisely what we all urgently require right now, he said simply. They immediately gathered their heavy coats and headed directly for the exit door. Two families, once broken and disparate, now slowly becoming one, stepping purposefully together into the steadily falling snow, finally ready to begin again.